In the cradle of early civilization, when the great rivers of Mesopotamia nourished the lands of ancient kingdoms, there lived a man whose destiny would shape the course of faith for all generations to come. His name was Abram, son of Terah, born in Ur of the Chaldees, a city of idols and rising towers, where men bowed before the works of their own hands and lifted altars to the sun, the moon, and the stars. Yet amid this world of many gods, one man heard the voice of the one unseen. Terah, his father, was a descendant of Shem, the son of Noah, and had journeyed with his household toward the land of Canaan. But when they reached Haran, they settled there, and the vision of the promised land lay waiting beyond the horizon. It was there that the word of the Lord came unto Abram, saying, "Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing." Genesis 12:1-2. Those words broke through the veil of the ordinary world, calling Abram into a destiny unseen by mortal eyes. He was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran, taking with him Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance and souls they had gathered. Their caravan moved through the wilderness, guided by faith more than by map or compass, for Abram journeyed, not knowing whither he went. Hebrews 11:8. As they passed through the land of Canaan, the Lord appeared unto Abram again, saying, "Unto thy seed will I give this land." Genesis 12:7. There between the hills and the oaks of Moreh, Abram built an altar unto the Lord, setting stones upon stones, not for idols, but for the invisible God who had called him. He journeyed onward toward Bethel, pitching his tent between Bethel and Ai, where again he built an altar and called upon the name of the Lord. But faith is not forged in peace alone. Soon famine fell upon the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there. Egypt, the kingdom of the Nile, rich and ancient, seemed a place of refuge, but it was also a land of cunning and fear. Sarai, his wife, was fair to look upon, and Abram feared that the Egyptians would slay him for her sake. So he said unto her, "Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake." Genesis 12:13. When Pharaoh's princes beheld Sarai, she was taken into Pharaoh's house. Yet the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his household with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Pharaoh, trembling, called Abram and said, "What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why saidst thou, She is my sister?" And he sent them away with great possessions, flocks, and servants. Thus the Lord turned even Abram's fear into favor, and the man of faith departed Egypt richer than before, his caravan heavy with the blessings of providence. As he returned to the land between Bethel and Ai, he came again to the altar he had built at the first, and there he called upon the name of the Lord. Yet prosperity brings its own trials. His herds and those of Lot grew too great for the land to bear. Strife arose between their herdsmen, and Abram, being a man of peace, said unto Lot, "Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right." Genesis 13:8-9. Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld the plain of Jordan, well watered and lush like the garden of the Lord. He chose the fertile valley and pitched his tent toward Sodom, a city rich in abundance yet poor in righteousness. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and again the Lord spake, saying, "Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever." Genesis 13:14-15. Abram built again an altar unto the Lord in Hebron, among the oaks of Mamre, where he dwelt in quiet faith. But his peace would not last, for the drums of war would soon echo across the plain of Jordan. Kings of the east made alliance and came against Sodom, Gomorrah, and the cities of the plain. They took the people captive, and among the captives was Lot, Abram's brother's son. When Abram heard that his kinsman was taken, he armed his trained servants, 318 born in his own house, and pursued the invaders unto the north. Under the stars of night, with courage greater than numbers, Abram and his servants fell upon the enemy by stealth and smote them. recovering all the goods and captives. As he returned victorious, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. There, out of the mists of history, appeared a mysterious figure, Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of the Most High God. He brought forth bread and wine and blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand." Genesis 14:19-20. And Abram gave him tithes of all. The king of Sodom offered Abram the spoils of war, but Abram refused, saying, "I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." Genesis 14:23. For Abram's trust was not in the wealth of kings, but in the promises of God. That night, as the smoke of battle faded and the stars shone bright, the word of the Lord came again to Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield, and thy exceeding great reward." Genesis 15:1. But Abram, weary of years and still childless, said, "Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus?" The Lord brought him forth abroad and said, "Look now toward heaven and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them, so shall thy seed be." Genesis 15:5. And Abram believed in the Lord, and it was counted to him for righteousness. A covenant was sealed that night, a binding promise between the Eternal and a man of dust. The Lord caused a deep sleep to fall upon Abram, and in a horror of great darkness he saw the future unfold. His descendants enslaved in a strange land, afflicted for 400 years, but afterward brought forth with great substance. When the sun went down, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp passed between the pieces of the sacrifice, and the Lord made a covenant, saying, "Unto thy seed have I given this land." Genesis 15:18. The fire of divine promise burned before Abram, yet the path to its fulfillment would pass through testing, longing, and the shaping of generations yet unborn. And so the man of faith watched the stars and waited for the child of promise, his heart both burdened and blessed by the voice of the unseen God. Years passed in the stillness of waiting, and the tents of Abram grew large with servants and flocks. Yet the silence of the night still echoed with the absence of a child. The promise of God seemed to linger beyond his reach, and Sarai, his wife, now aged and weary, began to wrestle with the ache of barrenness. She said unto Abram, "Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her." Genesis 16:2. In the customs of those ancient days, a servant might bear a child for her mistress, and Sarai's handmaid Hagar, an Egyptian, was given unto Abram. But what began as human reason seeking to hasten divine promise became a root of sorrow. Hagar conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her heart was lifted up against her mistress. Sarai, wounded in spirit, said unto Abram, "My wrong be upon thee." Abram, desiring peace, said, "Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee." Sarai dealt harshly with Hagar, and the handmaid fled into the wilderness. There, beside a fountain of water in the desert, the angel of the Lord found her and said, "Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou, and whither wilt thou go?" And she said, "I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai." The angel said unto her, "Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude." Genesis 16:9-10. The angel called her unborn son Ishmael, meaning God shall hear, for the Lord had heard her affliction. Hagar named that place Bir Lahai Roi, meaning the well of him that liveth and seeth me. She returned and bore Abram a son, and Abram called his name Ishmael. He was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. 13 more years passed, and Abram's hair grew white with age. Then, once again, the voice of God broke through the silence of years. "I am the Almighty God. Walk before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly." Genesis 17:1-2. Abram fell upon his face, and God spoke, "Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. Genesis 17:5. To Sarai too was given a new name, Sarah, meaning princess. And the Lord said, I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Genesis 17:16. Abraham laughed within himself, saying, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? But the Lord answered, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. Then God gave Abraham the sign of his covenant, circumcision, to seal the promise in flesh and faith for all generations to come. That very day, Abraham circumcised himself, his son Ishmael, and all the males of his household, as God had commanded him. Not long after, when the oaks of Mamre were heavy with summer shade, Abraham sat in the tent door during the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and saw 3 men standing by him. Rising quickly, he ran to meet them and bowed himself to the ground, saying, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Genesis 18:3. He brought water to wash their feet and prepared bread and a calf tender and good. As they ate under the tree, one of them said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. Sarah, who listened from within the tent, laughed silently within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? The Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord? Genesis 18:14. Fear and wonder mingled within her heart, and though she denied laughing, the Lord answered gently, Nay, but thou didst laugh. And that laughter born of disbelief would one day echo in the name of their promised child, Isaac, meaning he shall laugh. When the meal was finished, the men rose up and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham walked with them to send them on their way. The Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation? Genesis 18:17-18. Then he revealed his intent. The cry of Sodom and Gomorrah was great, and their sin grievous. Abraham, grieved for the people, drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Thus began one of the most solemn dialogues between man and God recorded in all Scripture. Abraham pleaded for mercy, saying, Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. The Lord answered, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. But Abraham, knowing the frailty of men, pressed further. 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. Each time, the Lord answered with patience and mercy, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place, his heart heavy with compassion for those who walked in darkness. That night, fire and brimstone would soon fall upon the plains of Jordan, and the man of faith who once rescued Lot in battle now interceded for him in prayer. As dawn approached, the angels entered Sodom, and the wickedness of the city reached its fullness. Lot and his family were led out by the hand, and when the sun rose upon the earth, the Lord rained fire and brimstone from heaven upon Sodom and Gomorrah. The smoke of the land went up as the smoke of a furnace. Abraham stood upon the heights and looked toward the plain. He saw the land where once his nephew had pitched his tents, now reduced to ashes, and the air trembled with the judgment of the Almighty. Yet in the midst of wrath, mercy was remembered. For God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the overthrow. Genesis 19:29. The days passed, and Abraham journeyed south to Gerar, a land ruled by Abimelech, king of the Philistines. Again he feared for his life and said of Sarah, She is my sister. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, saying, Behold, thou art but a dead man for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. Genesis 23. Abimelech, terrified, returned Sarah untouched and rebuked Abraham, who prayed for him, and the Lord healed Abimelech and his household. Then, in the fullness of time, as the Lord had spoken, Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had promised him. Abraham called his son's name Isaac. The camp erupted with laughter and joy, for Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. Genesis 21:6. but joy was soon shadowed by division. When Ishmael the son of Hagar mocked Isaac, Sarah said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. The thing was grievous in Abraham's sight, but God said, Let it not be grievous, Brady, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. Genesis 21:12-13. With a heavy heart, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away into the wilderness. When their water was spent, Hagar wept, unable to bear the sight of her child suffering. But God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of the Lord called to her out of heaven, saying, Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and they drank and lived. Ishmael grew and became an archer, and God was with him in the wilderness. Abraham, meanwhile, dwelt in peace in the land of the Philistines. He made a covenant with Abimelech at Beersheba, swearing peace beside a well, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And as the sun set upon his tents, Abraham's faith, though tested and refined through many trials, stood firm as the covenant's foundation. But even greater testing was yet to come, a trial that would reach into the very heart of promise itself. The morning broke quietly upon the plains of Beersheba. The tents of Abraham stood still beneath the pale light of dawn, and the air hung heavy with peace. Yet within the heart of the patriarch, a voice stirred that would shatter the stillness of his world. The same God who had called him from Ur, who had walked with him through famine, battle, and promise, now spoke again, not in the tones of comfort, but of testing. Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. Then the Lord said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Genesis 22:1-2. These words pierced the heart of Abraham like a sword. The child of promise, the miracle of laughter, the fulfillment of 25 years of waiting, now was to be offered upon the altar. The night gave no rest. Faith wrestled with love, and obedience struggled with human reason. Yet before the sun rose, Abraham rose also, silent, steadfast, resolved. He saddled his ass, took 2 young men and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering. For 3 days they journeyed northward, the father walking beside his son, carrying in his heart a secret too heavy for words. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off, Mount Moriah, rising stark against the morning sky. He said to his servants, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. Genesis 22:5. Isaac bore the wood of the burnt offering upon his back, while Abraham took the fire and the knife. As they walked together, Isaac turned to his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And Isaac asked, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham's voice trembled as he answered, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. Genesis 22:8. They came to the place God had shown him. There Abraham built an altar, laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, laying him upon the altar upon the wood. The old man stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But out of the heavens came a voice, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And the angel of the Lord called, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Genesis 22:12. Abraham lifted his eyes and saw a ram caught in a thicket. He took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. Then he called the name of that place Jehovah-Jireh. The Lord will provide. Genesis 22:14. From the mountaintop, the voice of the Lord spoke once more, renewing the promise that had begun long ago in Haran. By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, And in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. Genesis 22:16-17. Abraham returned to his servants, and they journeyed back together to Beersheba. Yet within him something had changed. The fire upon Mount Moriah had not consumed Isaac, but it had refined Abraham's soul like gold. The covenant was now sealed not merely by words and signs, but by the surrender of the heart itself. In the years that followed, Abraham's household prospered greatly, but the passage of time brought its share of sorrow. Sarah, his beloved companion through all the wanderings of his life, died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron, at the age of 127 years. Genesis 23:1-2. Abraham mourned deeply for her, weeping beside her body, the tent filled with the quiet grief of a man who had walked a lifetime beside her. Then he rose and sought a place to bury her. Among the sons of Heth he spoke humbly, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Genesis 23:4. The men of the land answered him respectfully, for Abraham was known as a prince of God among them. He purchased the cave of Machpelah from Ephron the Hittite for 400 shekels of silver, and there he buried Sarah in the field before Mamre. That field and cave became the first piece of land Abraham ever owned in Canaan, a small beginning of the great inheritance God had promised. After Sarah's death, Abraham turned his thoughts to the future of his son Isaac, through whom the covenant would continue. He said unto his eldest servant, the steward of his house, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, but thou shalt go unto my country and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. Genesis 24:2-4. The servant, faithful and wise, set forth with 10 camels laden with gifts, journeying northward to the city of Nahor. As he rested by a well at evening time, he prayed, saying, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. He asked that the maiden who would offer him water, and also to his camels, would be the one chosen by God for Isaac. Before he had finished speaking in his heart, Rebekah came out with her pitcher upon her shoulder, fair to look upon, and a virgin. When the servant asked her for a drink, she said, Drink, my lord, and hastened to let down her pitcher. When he had drunk, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also, until they have done drinking. Genesis 24:18-19. As she fulfilled his prayer exactly, the servant bowed his head and worshipped the Lord, saying, Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who hath not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. He gave Rebekah gifts of gold and silver and followed her to her household. Her brother Laban welcomed the servant and listened as he told of Abraham's God, his mission, and the sign given at the well. When the family consented, the servant brought forth jewels, raiment, and treasures for Rebekah and her household, and the next morning Rebekah said, I will go. So she arose with her maids and departed upon the camels, journeying toward the land of Canaan. At eventide, as Isaac meditated in the field, he lifted up his eyes and saw the caravan approaching. Rebekah also lifted up her eyes and saw Isaac, and she lighted off the camel. The servant told Isaac all things that he had done, and Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Genesis 24:67. Abraham, now old and well stricken in age, rejoiced to see the covenant of his God pass onward to his son. Yet even in his later years he took another wife, Keturah, who bare him 6 sons. From these sons came tribes and nations, but unto Isaac Abraham gave all that he had. When Abraham was 175 years old, the days of his pilgrimage were complete. Surrounded by the blessings of a fulfilled promise and the peace of faith, he gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, full of years, and was gathered to his people. Isaac and Ishmael, long separated, came together to bury their father in the cave of Machpelah beside Sarah his wife, the mother and father of nations. The winds of the desert whispered over the stones, and the stars that once shone upon his wandering still glittered above his resting place. From his faith had sprung the roots of 3 great peoples, and through his obedience, the promise of redemption continued to flow through the generations. For it was written, Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. And though his body slept beneath the soil of Canaan, his faith lived on, in Isaac, in Jacob, in the prophets and kings, and in all who would walk by faith and not by sight. Thus ended the earthly journey of Abraham, the friend of God, whose trust in the unseen shaped the destiny of nations, and whose covenant became a light for all who seek the promises of the eternal. The sands of the desert shifted over the years, and though Abraham's tent was folded and his voice was silenced in the earth, the promise spoken by the eternal did not fade with the passing of his breath. For the covenant had not been written upon parchment nor sealed with wax, but upon the line of generations and the heart of faith itself. Isaac, the son of laughter, became the living bearer of his father's covenant. The God who had called Abraham now appeared also unto Isaac, saying, Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. Genesis 26:3. Thus the voice of promise flowed onward, not as a memory but as a living inheritance. Generations rose and fell, and the land promised to Abraham became the land of Israel, a kingdom of tribes, prophets, and kings. When David, the shepherd boy, was anointed king, he too looked back to Abraham's covenant as the foundation of his throne. The psalmist sang, He hath remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, which covenant he made with Abraham, and his oath unto Isaac. Psalm 105, 8-9. Even in exile and captivity, when Jerusalem lay in ruins and the people were scattered among nations, the prophets still lifted their voices to the God of Abraham. Isaiah declared, Look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bare you. For I called him alone and blessed him and increased him. Isaiah 51:2. The covenant had not been forgotten, for the Eternal does not forget his word. From the plains of Mesopotamia to the rivers of Babylon, from the altars of Canaan to the scrolls of the prophets, the name of Abraham echoed as a symbol of faith and divine friendship. He was called the friend of God, James 2:23, for he walked not by sight, but by trust in the unseen. Centuries passed, and the line of promise continued until, in the fullness of time, another child of covenant was born. Not in the tents of a patriarch, but in the humble stable of Bethlehem. In that child, the faith of Abraham found its ultimate fulfillment, for as it is written, If ye be Christ's, then are ye Abraham's seed, and heirs according to the promise. Galatians 3:29. Thus the covenant transcended tribe and tongue, becoming the heritage of all who believe. The faith that began with one man beneath the stars of Ur became a river flowing through history, reaching every people who lift their eyes toward heaven in hope. Through the children of Israel, through the prophets and apostles, through those who believed though they had not seen, Abraham's faith endured as a testament to the God who calls, the God who provides, and the God who remembers forever. Even now, in the lands once trodden by his feet, in the deserts of the east and the cities that rose from the dust, men still speak his name in prayer. To the sons of Israel, he is Abraham Avinu, Abraham our father. To the sons of Ishmael, he is Ibrahim al-Khalil, Abraham the friend of God. And to those who follow the promise by faith, he is the father of all who believe. So the covenant of Abraham lives, not as an ancient relic, but as a living bond between heaven and earth, a light kindled in the dawn of time, still burning through the ages. And as long as men look upon the stars and ponder their Maker, the voice that called Abram from Ur shall still echo in the hearts of those who dare to follow the unseen path of faith. He who once walked the barren roads of Canaan now walks eternally in the pages of history, his obedience echoing like a song that cannot be silenced. The dust of his footsteps still stirs beneath the winds of the desert, and the promise spoken to him continues to shape the destiny of nations. In the stillness of the ancient world, Abraham's covenant with the Almighty became a bridge between heaven and earth. not a fleeting contract of men, but an everlasting testament. The words spoken beside the smoking altar at Mamre and upon the highlands of Moriah outlived empires, kings, and kingdoms. And, for the Eternal declared, "In blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore." Genesis 22:17. Generations turned like the cycles of the moon, and yet that promise burned bright. Through Abraham a divine pattern was revealed, that righteousness is born not of power, nor inheritance, nor conquest, but of faith. As it is written, "And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness." Genesis 15:6. These words became the cornerstone upon which all spiritual faiths would rest, the moment when trust in the unseen became the measure of the human soul. Abraham's obedience was never of convenience but of conviction. Each command of God was a mountain to climb, each promise a fire through which he must walk. Yet in every trial he rose not with pride but with submission. When told to leave his homeland, he departed. When told to wait, he tarried. When told to sacrifice, he lifted the knife, believing that the giver of life could also restore it. From this faith sprang nations, prophets, and laws. From this faith rose prayers in temples and songs in wilderness tabernacles. The same faith would later guide Moses through the sea, David to his throne, and Daniel through the lion's den. It would shape the visions of Isaiah and the courage of the Maccabees. In every generation, the covenant of Abraham breathed life into the hope of redemption. Yet even beyond the borders of Israel, the shadow of Abraham's tent stretched far and wide, from the deserts of Arabia to the hills of Judea, from the cathedrals of Europe to the valleys of Africa. Men called upon the God of Abraham, each in their own tongue, yet all seeking the same light. For through Abraham, the promise was not confined to one people but destined for all. As the Lord had said, "In thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Genesis 12:3. And thus it was that the covenant found its ultimate expression, not in the might of armies nor the splendor of temples, but in the faith of hearts that believed though they had not seen. The journey of Abraham became a symbol for every soul that hears the quiet call of God and answers, "Here am I." Even in our own age, where the noise of the world often drowns the whisper of heaven, Abraham's story remains a call to the ancient way, to trust when there is no map, to believe when the promise seems impossible, to walk by faith and not by sight. For every soul that leaves behind the comfort of certainty to follow the unseen path is walking, in some measure, the same road that began in Ur of the Chaldees. There, under the same sky that stretches above us still, a man once gazed into the night and heard a voice not bound by time or tongue. The stars were scattered like diamonds across the firmament, and the Eternal said, "Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them, so shall thy seed be." Genesis 15:5. And beneath those stars, Abraham believed, the world has changed beyond what he could have dreamed. Kingdoms have risen and fallen, languages have been born and forgotten, the boundaries of nations have shifted like sand. Yet the faith of Abraham remains untouched, untarnished, eternal. His life stands as proof that one man's obedience can alter the course of history, that the covenant between God and humanity is not written in stone, but in the living hearts of those who trust him. As the prophets foretold, as the apostles proclaimed, and as the faithful still declare, the blessing of Abraham continues to flow through the ages, a river that never dries, a promise that never fades. For though the patriarch sleeps, his faith yet speaks, calling mankind to remember the covenant that began beneath the stars. When the desert winds move across the ancient hills of Canaan, they carry with them echoes of that first calling. "Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee." Genesis 12:1. It was not merely a summons to journey through the earth, it was a summons to journey through the soul. And so the story of Abraham is not only the account of one man's life, but the pattern of all who walk with God. To trust when the promise tarries, to obey when the reason is hidden, to build altars in the wilderness and believe that the unseen hand will guide every step. This is the legacy of Abraham. He was not a king adorned in gold, nor a conqueror of empires. His greatness lay in his faith. quiet, steadfast, unyielding. A man who spoke little, but believed deeply, who gave without keeping, trusted without seeing, and followed without turning back. And so, through the ages, the nations remember. Abraham stands not as a relic of the past, but as a living symbol of the eternal bond between the Creator and mankind. In the end, Abraham's journey is the story of every soul that dares to hope beyond what is visible. It is the ancient reminder that faith is the truest homeland, and trust in God the only road worth walking. And though centuries may pass and the stars themselves may fade, the promise shall remain. For the word of the Lord endures forever. So, beneath the vast sky of eternity, the voice still calls, the stars still shine, and the covenant still stands. Abraham, the father of nations, the friend of God, the man who believed. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. More Bible figures await.